unanimous in their hate for me, and I welcome their hatred.
What is up, everyone? I mean, I gotta say this. I am super pumped for this. I've been waiting for this. We take 7 months off between the season, and to be back is such a great feeling. So, Ian, how are you? Good to see you again.
I'm doing good. Great to see you too, man. I'm as pumped as you are, ready to get back to normalcy with college football.
Yeah, I mean, the season is upon us. Next Saturday is the first set of games. We're not going to go over those. We'll go over those on Wednesday. But this is who we are. We are a college football media brand. We primarily do our show on YouTube Live, on Facebook Live, on X Live, formerly Twitter, and I think Instagram. I can't remember. I'm going to have to look into StreamYard's setup. I think they still do it. It was kind of funky the last end of the season, how weird they were doing it. But regardless, that's where we're at on all those. My name is Chris McLean. So I'll get into it just as far as who we are as our fandom. So we cover USF in Tampa, Florida Gators, USC, and UCLA. So the reason that I cover Florida, even though I didn't go there and neither did Ian, is we cover them because we've been fans for a long time. Also, my family has been students there. My dad, my uncle, and like 10 of my cousins. It's maybe even more now. It's kind of crazy how many of my cousins have gone there. And then USF, both me and Ian. Ian is a student currently. He actually was filming the football practices last year, and in their media program, their mass communications program. And I graduated there a long time ago, 2007. Yeah, so very long ago. But I also, in my law school travels, during my time there in law school, I was in an internship at both Gardner-Webb and USF in the athletic departments doing compliance. So I have experience there. And then the reason why we cover USC and UCLA, I live in LA now. If you can't tell by some of the swag in the background, I work in TV and film. That poster back there is from the show that's coming out for Marvel. It's Wonder Man with my favorite actor I've ever worked with, Yaya. He's an amazing dude. Hopefully this takes off and that they're going to put it into the some bigger things, bigger projects later on the line with Marvel. No, so I work in TV and film now. So I'm here out in LA, and, I'm 30 minutes away from both campuses. I have a lot of friends in the industry, and then friends outside of that went to both schools, that are big fans of both schools. Shout out to Richard, UCLA fan. Shout out to Jess, a friend of me and my wife's. My wife, I got married in between the break, and Ian got engaged. So yeah, shout out to Ian for congratulations to that. And Ian's getting married at the end of June coming up, or beginning of June next year. And a lot of things have been going on. But yeah, besides, as far as all that is, we cover those 4 teams, but we also cover the entirety of college football. We do each week, what we do, the rundown is Sunday, we recap all the major games. If it's 12 to 15 games, we're going to cover them. If it has anything to do with conference lead, major conference games, big rivalry games where, there's a lot on the line, and playoff implications. Because now, lo and behold, look what's happening. There are more playoff spots. And I tell you, Ian, this is probably the biggest thing that's ever happened to college football. And I've been hearing other people talk about it. I don't think fans of college football that are just sideline fans or people that are casuals, they realize how big the sport is about to be in the next 4 to 5 months. It is going to take off like we've never seen before. The popularity of the sport will because of the fact that now it's not just 4 to 6 teams each year that have a legitimate shot. It's going to shoot up to almost the entirety of the top 25 now have a chance of getting in and have a legitimate chance of getting to a championship. It just brings so much more meaningful games into November. I mean, it's going to be completely different. I'm super excited for this. But like I said, how we do this show is we recap the games on Sundays. You know, me and Ian will look at everything we can. I do like 6 hours of recap, watching the 20-minute to 22-minute films of each game, breaking down everything I can as best I can to see how these teams are operating, how things are working, and then give you guys the best recap that we can through the day, through that game, through the show on Sundays. And then on Wednesdays, what we do is we do a show where we break down the games coming up. So we give us our best insight into what we feel the teams will be able to do into Saturday's games. And that's how the show works. So every Sunday and Wednesday, 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific, that is where you can find the show. Like I said, it's on X, it's on YouTube, it's on Facebook, it's on Instagram, and it's on TikTok as well. Some of the stuff, not much on TikTok, but that's where you can find us. Our socials, as far as those go, are for X, Instagram, and I believe TikTok are hater_radio. If you type that in for any of it, it'll find it out real quick. Haterradio.com for all of our articles that we do. We do articles for all the teams that we cover. Plus, we'll do some random ones. I'm going to do one about the playoffs and then one about probably Billy Napier's tenure, which we'll get into when we talk about Florida. But also for YouTube, to find us on YouTube, it is at Hater Radio. That's all you have to type in, at Hater Radio on YouTube. It'll come right up to our channel. All of our videos are there. Random stuff from last year when I did games in Utah. And where else did I go last year? I went to San Diego State game. It was a UCLA San Diego State game. I went to the Florida State game.
You went to the Rose Bowl.
Went to the Rose Bowl. Yeah, I can't forget that. God, that was honestly, that is probably one of the coolest things I've done probably ever. Like, not just moving out to LA, but maybe ever sports wise. And, you know, and a shout out to Jess, the USC fan. She hooked it up, and, you know, we had great seats, and it was a great game. That was such a good game to be a part of, to be able to see it. And
yeah, when I was watching that game and that ending, I was like, man, Chris is at this one. And I gotta watch it from here at my uncle's place. He like picked the best Rose Bowl.
I know, it was a great one. And it was funny because it was like the end of the fourth quarter and Michigan had the ball and they had to score to tie. And I thought that Alabama was going to do it because they stopped them on that third down, and it was like a 4th and like 10, and they converted and they just kept going. And then in the overtime, I don't know if, like, I can't even remember, did Alabama hit a field goal?
No,
because I know that Michigan just had to score the touchdown.
Michigan scored the touchdown first, and then Bama first possession. Milrow.
Oh, they got stopped. That's right. It was that fourth down where Jalen Milrow went up the middle and they stuffed him. Yeah, God, man, I forgot about it. I mean, it's been 7-8 months, so you don't think about it unless you rewatch the highlights or anything. But yeah, great game, and then Michigan wins the title, and you know, it's still, I don't know, it's crazy to think with all those potential ramifications that they'll get from the NCAA, but it doesn't seem like the title is going to get taken away, which is kind of ridiculous considering what level of cheating was going on. But the NCAA at this point is pretty toothless as far as their ability to like sanction people. So this is probably the best they're going to be able to do. Michigan probably would have sued if they did do something harsh. And so they figured they're not going to be able to do anything anyways. So they wouldn't even do something harsh. So with that being said, let's jump into it. Okay, first team we're going to talk about for a season preview is UCLA. So I'll go over it mainly because, you know, I'm out here in LA and I've got a better connection to the LA teams than Ian does. But so Chip Kelly leaves, moves on to Ohio State as offensive coordinator. It's a bit of a slap in the face, but I will say it seems like Chip Kelly, when he was at Oregon, that was a decade plus ago. So it was a completely different game than what it is now. And so, the changes of NIL and recruiting and like how things are completely different than they were 15 years ago. He probably just didn't want any part of it. And he was at UCLA, so it was like a little less to do with some of the ridiculousness that goes on with recruiting. But he was still probably feeling it because NIL was starting to become a major deal the last couple of years, especially the last year or two. And so he probably just got tired of it. And he's like, you know what? I can be an offensive coordinator at Ohio State. I don't have to be the head coach. I don't have to worry about all these headaches. I don't have to re-recruit all my players every year. I just have to, make up a game plan, let the head coach worry about recruiting everyone. And then I go out and do this and whatever, good for him. Because he actually left UCLA in a pretty good footing considering where they were when he took over. Because they were only winning like 3 or 4 games when he took over. And he only won like 3 or 4 the first 2 years as well. But he got him to the point of solidly winning like 8, 9 games and getting to bowl games and winning bowl games. So he did a pretty well job of making something out of this UCLA squad. Now comes in Deshaun Foster. He is a UCLA Hall of Famer, played in the NFL, very good running back. And he was the running backs coach for several years, and they tabbed him to be the head coach. And, I think it's a right move. You get some continuity with him. The kind of crappy thing that happened was that Danton Lynn left, and lo and behold, he switches and goes to USC. So we'll talk about him a little bit later when the USC stuff. But Danton Lynn leaves, but in replacing him is what's his name? Ikeka Malloy. And Ikeka was a co-defensive coordinator for Washington from 2020 to 2021. And he's been D-line coach as well for UCLA. So he has experience. He said that he likes to maintain what was happening with Danton Lynn's scheme, which, was a multiple 3-4 base that used very versatile players that could be either a hand in the ground rushing edge or fall into coverage linebacker. So he wants to continue that scheme, which I hope they do, because that will be tremendous because of how well they did last year. They finished top 10 in the country after the previous year going like 90th, I think it was 90th or something. It was really high. It was close to like the hundreds. And they were a terrible defense. And then last year completely turned it around. One of the best defenses in the country. And if you can continue that trend, they can, push forward with what they have. I think they have a solid defense enough to do that. They're not returning as many on that side of the ball. I think they're only returning 5. They lost Letu Latu, who was a stud first-round pick, and I'm excited to see what he does in the NFL. But, besides that, there are some really good players there, really good pieces, some incoming transfers that should do well. Let's see, the top 2 tacklers from last year, Kane Medrano and Olafemi Oladeju. It's going to be solid enough because if they can maintain that same scheme, they can put the pressure on the opposing quarterbacks and stuff the run as well as they did. They should be able to stay in most games. And if they can keep it, I don't know, like around like a 24 points per game. Considering that they're moving to the Big Ten. Hello, we didn't even talk about that. Moving to the Big Ten, USC and UCLA. So, most of the teams that they're going to play in the Big Ten are low-scoring teams or that play defensive games, which right now kind of favors UCLA and USC because they both like to score a lot. And so on the flip side, defensively, now let's talk about the offense for UCLA. UCLA is going to they lost Dante Moore, and they're bringing back what's his name? I don't want to get it wrong. Garbers. Yeah, Ethan Garbers. Yeah. They're bringing back Ethan Garbers, who started quite a few games at the end of the year last year, and also bringing in offensive coordinator Eric Bieniemy, who was the offensive coordinator for Patrick Mahomes and the Kansas City Chiefs for 2 Super Bowls. He went to Washington Commanders. Sorry. He went to the Washington Commanders last 2 years, I believe, and they kind of struggled, but it was never indicative. He was at a tough situation. He needed to get out of Kansas City to prove himself. It just didn't work in Washington. Now he has a really good shot. I think there's enough athletes in Westwood to be able to make a difference. There's a lot of good offensive pieces here. They're returning 7 on offense of their starters. Offensive line, there's 3 starters that have a combined 101 career starts, which that's huge, especially when they're going into a new offense. It's going to be less of the Chip Kelly spread and more of like a pro style. It's going to be something with probably shorter passing game and like a different run game to probably support the passing game. And, I expect Garbers to have a really good year. He's been around for a while now. I believe he's a senior, and he transferred in from, I can't remember where, but he's been around the block. So he's definitely solid quarterback. As far as receiving core, what is it? They have Logan Loya, J. Michael Sturdivant, and tight end Malika Matavo back. They totaled 1,535 yards last year. So that's a lot of yards coming back. They've got a Notre Dame transfer coming in, Rico Flores. I feel like this team offensively, because they have the experience from the last couple of years where they were able to put points up against pretty good opponents, I think they continue that. I don't like their schedule, though, because their schedule is quite difficult. They play a lot of tough teams, and I expect probably I don't know. I'm expecting probably at ceiling an 8-4 team and probably like a 7-5 team. And that's not insulting. I think that's just the reality of what it is. You have a first-year head coach, which there might be some mistakes and stuff that happen game day because of that. Because he's never been a head coach before on any level. And then you have new offense with Eric Bieniemy coming in. So there might be some issues there. But overall, there is talent here. There's enough playmakers to make a difference. The schedule is tough because they play LSU on the road. They play Penn State on the road. They play Oregon. They play Nebraska on the road, Washington on the road. Those are some tough games. I really think that Nebraska team, that's a team that might be surprising to people. Matt Rule, got Baylor up and running in his second year, and I think that might be the case here with this Nebraska team. Plus, what's the kid at Nebraska? The freshman, is it Raiola? Is that his name?
The one from that was going to commit to Georgia, and then he went to Nebraska before.
Yeah, and kid looks good. So and I think it's leaning towards him starting. So I think Nebraska might be a surprise team, and because Nebraska has a really easy schedule up until like their 7th game, so they easily could go 7-0, and that's huge confidence booster. Regardless of your opponent or whatever, starting off 7-0 would be huge for them, especially because he's a freshman, and getting that hot start would be great. Regardless, back to UCLA, it's going to be a struggle. I think they're going to be fine. It's not going to be great this year, but it's definitely going to be a solid enough year. The games that I think they need to have a chance at to make a good year, they need to look at probably the Nebraska game and the Washington game, because Washington is a new coach as well with Jed Fish from Arizona. So there's a chance they could get them this year. It's a road game, but it's better off this year than next year, because I'm pretty sure Fish is going to have them up and running in no time. But then maybe the USC game. So the Nebraska game, the Washington game, and the USC game, those are 3 that they have a shot at if they can change that from a 6-6, 7-5 record to maybe 8-4, maybe 9-3. So, because I don't think they're going to win the Penn State game, the Oregon game, or the LSU game. I think those are 3 automatic losses, and it sucks because those are right in a row, 1, 2, and 3. Okay, so moving on, let's talk about our USF Bulls. Ian, I'm going to let you do this because we're back and forth here with this. So let's hear your USF preview here.
So for context, ever since I was a kid, I have a sport bucket list of things I want to see in my lifetime. And every one of my favorite teams have checked the mark. Gators win a national championship, 2006, 2008. Rays going to a World Series, 2008, 2020. Lightning winning the Stanley Cup. I wasn't really around in 04, but 2020, 2021. The only thing left on that list is USF winning a conference championship. That is the only thing. They did not win the Big East. They have yet to win the American. They didn't even win Conference USA the 2 years they were there.
Yeah.
And I was talking with my family and other friends and even other people at USF. This is what collectively we feel the best shot going forward for USF to really make a run at it. It's really we said at the beginning of the year, looking at the schedule, the series of games where it goes Tulane, Memphis, and UAB, at best, they have to be 2 and 3 to have a shot at the conference title. And they really, because beginning of the year, they start with, Bethune-Cookman, then they got to go to Bama, and then they got to go to Southern Miss, and then they host Miami. But, Tulane, see how their rebuild is doing. Memphis has always been a really tough team in the American, and UAB, walloped them in last year. So that's really going to be the make or break of the season, are those 3 games. With that being said, if it's really going to hinge on really the defense, the offense is, Byron Brown is coming back, and Sean Atkins, that connection is returning, which, worked wonders for them last year. The offense is very good. One thing I will add is one thing that could really help. Byron Brown was the leading, obviously not really going to be a surprise. Byron Brown was the leading rusher of all players on USF last year. The one thing about that, which when I looked at it, was the run game, the running backs themselves really couldn't help when you watch those games. It was really just draw option. There wasn't a lot of, surprise when, Byron Brown took off and ran, which if you have the run game, they have Nacon Wright still, his last year of eligibility, and a pretty solid offensive line in the group of 5. They have a chance to, really, make the run game as good as Byron Brown's run game is. And I think that would open up a huge plethora of possibilities on the offense to make them even more dangerous. So they were top 25 offense last year. And they went like 6-6. The reason they lost those games, and we saw it firsthand, And this is what it's all going to come down to is the defense.
Yeah.
USF was top 25 in total offense last year. I think they ranked 17. They were in the top 25. Total defense, they were in the 120 range of all FBS teams. That can't happen this year. If they want to make a shot at winning the American Conference, or heck, if they do that, there may be a possibility of them with the playoff with this whole new system. If they want any shot of that, the defense must come up with stops. It cannot be ping pong games back and forth, back and forth. What it's, like I said, that's what it's going to come down to. It's, the tackling, the coverage was very suspect last year. There was a glimmer of hope with the Syracuse game and the bowl game. I went to that one. Now I'm going to put an asterisk on because Syracuse didn't even have their quarterback. They were having a wide receiver at QB, but the coverage was much better. They were not fooled on any of the passing plays, which was kind of like they threw 6, but they were not fooled at all. There was barely like they weren't shocked at all. So that was at least a good sign and adjustments. And again, firsthand experience seeing, Golish in practice, he is very adamant about adjustments. So I know that is going to be one thing that's hammered home. I know Jalen Schuler, the linebacker, and Rashad Cheney on the defensive line. Those are going to be the guys that are really going to be the crux of the defense. And in the secondary, Aramis Brown as well. Both guys with the experience and both that can really be the catalyst to have a strong defense. I don't think the defense, I'm not going to say it's like top 10, but at least in the American, you have to be at least like in terms of conference rankings, you got to be at least top 5 defense right now so you can complement the offense for you, because there were games like they got run out of town by UAB, UTSA boat raced them, and then they got blown out by FAU. It's just stuff that can't happen this year. So all things considered, I think I'll go with the whole, ceiling floor thing. I think ceiling honestly is 10-2. And floor would be 6-6. I still think even at their worst, they can win a lot of these games. This, like I said, once they get into the AAC and once they have that 3-game stretch with Tulane, Memphis, and UAB, we'll really see how this team is. The expectations are very high. I have a lot of confidence right now in USF. Said that before in other seasons and didn't pan out, but we're gonna, knock on wood for this one. But again, it's all gonna come down to the defense. I want to see how the first couple of games. Especially I think the biggest one would be at Southern Miss, because Bethune-Cookman is a layup, at least it should be, and then you got to go to Tuscaloosa, so that's not exactly the one. But Southern Miss is like the closest to their level that we can really see how this defense is. I have faith, the offense, their tempo attack is still going to be effective. Byron Brown is still going to be as dangerous as he is, and Sean Atkins will be able to snag, 500 touchdowns this year, however much it takes. I have faith in the offense. It's the defense that is going to make or break the season for the Bulls.
Yeah, I mean, you laid it out well. I'm curious if they do go 10-2 in your ceiling scenario, who's their 2 losses in that scenario?
Miami, Bama. And then they go undefeated in conference play.
Yeah, and that honestly seems – and the crazy thing is I think this team is good enough to go 1-1 in that Bama-Miami scenario between those 2 games. The Miami game is going to be really tough because Miami might be rolling at that point. I don't know as of right now how I feel if they're going to beat Florida. I think that game's a real toss-up. And so it's there's no real clear, decisive favorite in that game. But the rest of their games are going to get rolling because they don't have a difficult schedule, Miami. So they should be up to snuff by the time they play USF. And if that's the case, I think the Miami game is going to be a little bit harder for USF to win. I honestly feel like they have a better chance because DeBoer is taking over for Saban, that there might be some like, things that are problems that they'll have to work out. It's a first year coach at a program. It's never perfect. Like it hardly ever is. I mean, I know Bama's been a machine for 15 years, but there might be some issues. There were a lot of guys that transferred out. USF would, because they have an easy game in Bethune-Cookman, they can come into that game ready to go because they've probably been focusing all their energy and all their game prep for Bama. Why? They don't need a prep for Bethune-Cookman. They know they're going to win that game. They could put out the backups and still win that game. But the Bama game, they're probably putting all their energy into this, and I really think they can pull it off. It's almost, and I'm going to say this because I'm going to the game, it's almost like 2007 when
Against
USF
Auburn.
went on the road to Auburn, and I went to that game as well, and I'm going to this game. 2 games in the state of Alabama against big programs when, people didn't think much of USF. Hey, maybe history repeats itself. I'm excited to go to this game. I'm excited for USF. It's a lot of stuff is going in the right direction for the program. Getting the on-campus stadium, hopefully extensions for Coach Golish. Looks like there was an extension for the basketball coach. So things are going in the right direction for athletics. And the big prize is getting into a Power 4 conference. If it's going to be the Big 12 or the ACC or maybe even the Big 10, there are many possibilities for this school. There is a huge media market in Tampa, and that conferences know that, and they're kind of, the everything hasn't been finalized yet as far as conference alignment. There's still many things to happen. FSU and Clemson are fighting ACC, and there might be some ACC teams that leave. I don't know if that would be the best move for USF if they get into a conference like ACC, where there may be some problems there. If they lose a lot of the big name brands, I don't know. There's still a lot of really good brand names there. Louisville is a strong name that has won championships in basketball. Pittsburgh is a strong brand. Virginia Tech's a strong brand. Duke is a strong brand, especially basketball. So I don't know. I do know that there is a lot of momentum for USF, especially if Alex Golish stays the next several years. I hope he does. I know there's a slim chance that he does if they do well, but because of the fact that they're getting a new stadium, they might get into a new conference that will give them the money that they can compete with the big teams. I really think there's a lot to like about USF, and considering that it's not cold ever in Tampa, and a lot of these other places are really cold that he might go to. I don't know. I mean, quality of life. Your quality of life is better in a place like Tampa, Florida, compared to like, I don't know, Iowa State, where it's the middle of nowhere and there's nothing going on. I don't know. You just have to think about those things. And I really like Alex Golish. She's done tremendous for the school, and the offense is great. I have no complaints on offense. Todd Orlando, the defensive coordinator for USF, seems to be getting the pieces needed, the transfers coming in, the bodies to be able to compete. Recruiting is going up and up. Last year they recruited very well in their recruiting class, one of the best. I think it was the top AAC class, and their transfer class was very high transfer class. So they're doing very well on all those fronts. I want to see the momentum continue. Like Ian said, I think it's about that range of 6-6 to 10-2. I think their ceiling is a little bit higher because of their offense. I think they're going to be able to score on most teams. I think their floor. I think their floor is probably like 8-4, because I don't see many tough teams outside of Alabama, Miami, Tulane, and Memphis. The rest of those teams, the last 4 or 5 games of the season, FAU, Navy, Charlotte, Tulsa, Rice, they should, outside of FAU, they should win all of those games easily. Like they should win them and going away. So 8-4, I have a floor for them, and I'm saying probably I'm going to say a ceiling of 11-1. I really think they can be 11-1 and get to the AAC, and then if that's the case, they can get to the playoff. It's anything is possible. I know we're not giving a definitive because we're giving a floor and a ceiling. But that's just where we're at. Okay, let's move on to USC. Now I spoke of the movement of Danton Lin. Okay, I don't know if a lot of people know this guy because UCLA was kind of under the radar last year with how good defensively they were. People that really know college football knew how well they were, and I know Ian, you know, because I spoke so much of UCLA, so obviously we cover them, so we know. But like Danton Lin seems to be this like wonder kid of defensive minds. He really is setting the stage. I know he's not going to end up being a defensive coordinator for very much longer. He's going to get a head coaching position, especially if he does well in at USC, which I think I'm almost guaranteed that he will. The guy is super smart. He is super knowledgeable. His dad was a head coach, played in the NFL. You know, the kid is just I can't like there's not enough words to describe how like amazing this guy as a defensive coordinator. He turned around a squad that was, like I said, close to the hundreds in nationally defensively and got them to top 10 in a year, less than a year. It was like 9 months. That is such a like rocket ship of a trajectory. It's absurd. And just imagine what he can do because the talent level at USC right now is just a little bit higher than UCLA's. And if he has that much more talent and he can put it together, especially with an offense like, you know, Lincoln Riley is going to score points. He's averaged about 40 points a game the last, like, I don't know what it is. Like his like the point total for his teams the last like 7-8 years have been ridiculous. It's been off the charts good. And he was like the third best scoring team last year. And that was with a 7-5 record. Imagine if their defense can hold teams to like 22 points a game and they're scoring 40. There's no way they lose games. And there's no guarantee that happens. But like I said, they're moving into the Big Ten. Big Ten's offense are not as complex and not as good as the ones that Danton Lin saw last year with Washington, with Oregon, you know, with USC, you know. So Danton Lin is ready for whatever gets thrown his way. They're not playing Ohio State. They're playing a Michigan team on the road that is losing a lot of players from last year. And I feel like this USC team is poised to make a run to, I don't know if they're going to get into the conference championship game. They may not, but I still think they're a potential playoff team. I think they're good enough offensively to compete with anyone in the Big Ten. They have a tough first game against LSU in Vegas that I may or may not go to. I haven't really figured out yet. I'm leaning towards wanting to go to, but it's just it may not be in the cards. But either way, they're playing in Vegas against LSU. Tough game, but I think LSU, with losing Jaden Daniels and Neighbors and Thomas, won't be as good as they were last year. They may take a step back, maybe like an 8-4 team, maybe a 7-5 team. So they might struggle against USC. And if USC is scoring points with Miller Moss, who Miller Moss had 6 TDs in their bowl game, and like this kid has been waiting. He was patient. Caleb came in from Oklahoma. Miller sat, didn't transfer. He's an LA kid. He's like, I'm going to wait my turn. And he looks good, man. I'm telling you, in that bowl game, he looked real good. I think that was a Holiday Bowl record. And so like, he is definitely going to make a difference. Zachariah Branch is back, who's a stud. Like, if you don't know this kid's name, you will definitely know it next year or this year because he's going to put up a ton of numbers again. Running back wise, Quentin Joyner, Jaquavius Marks. He's a transfer from Mississippi State. There's a young kid, Brian Jackson, who looks like he'll take some carries as well. As far as offensive line, I think they're only returning like three starters, which, honestly, with the offense, I'm not worried. Like, there will always be pieces missing, and like he has to plug and play. Lincoln Riley is the best offensive mind in all of college football, bar none. I think he is the best. He's had 3 Heisman winners and 1 Heisman runner-up. So that's 4 basically that have been the best quarterbacks in the entire country. He proves it year in, year out, every year. He knows what he's doing. And now you complement with that offense with one of the best young minds on the defensive side in Danton Lynn. I just really like this squad. Obviously, we cover them, and I cover them specifically because I'm in LA, so I might be more biased. I'm excited for this team. Like, I know people are like, oh, they were 7-5 last year, or 8-5. But you know what? I think because that 8-5, it's kind of like quieted their like star power into this year. They're playing an easier schedule coming into the Big Ten. I mean, they still play Washington and UCLA, but now they get to play Minnesota, Maryland, Rutgers. Like, these are some easy teams that they should be able to easily rack up some wins. There are some tougher games. They do have an easy one against Utah State as well, but they have Michigan, Wisconsin, Penn State, and Notre Dame and Nebraska. But I think they should be able to beat Nebraska. I think they should beat Penn State at home. Michigan, I think they're better than them. The Notre Dame game is going to be tough. I don't know how good Notre Dame is going to be, but I do like Riley Leonard. I think he's a solid quarterback. I think if he had been healthy last year, Duke would have been a big player in the ACC. But I think floor for them is probably 9-3, and I think more than likely it's 10-2. I think they go 10-2, and if they go 10-2 with that schedule, with Notre Dame and LSU as their non-conference opponents, I see them 10-2 getting in the playoff, and they don't have to play in the Big Ten championship game to do it. So I envision this being a playoff team. Ian, any thoughts on them before we move on to Florida?
Yeah, with USC, it's definitely there's a lot of skeptics out there, especially after last year, because kind of similar, like it was like a more like high profile USF, because they had all the offensive talent in the world, great play calling, great players on offense, but when you got into the games and the losses, it was all defense, so that really let them down, and they just couldn't like pull out the wins that they did like Lincoln Riley's first year. I think I'm with you. It's really going to come down to, like I said, how well the defense does and how they bounce back. Miller Moss, I think in that system will go well with Lincoln Riley. He's got plenty of athletes at wide out to complement him, and he's got a pretty solid offensive line. And especially like we said with the defense coordinator edition, they should be better. But this, going into the Big Ten, it's definitely a lot tougher. You open the year against LSU in Vegas, so that's not a layup. Then you get some games like Utah. Then they got to go to the Big House, which that's tough already. Their third game of the year. I think the first LSU and Michigan game, that's going to be a real. If they can win one of those games, I think we could be like, okay, SC should be okay. But if they lose both, it might be a sign of things. But regardless, I think they should have a bounce back year. I don't think, like you said, I'm not sure about conference champions, but I think around maybe like the 9-win range, I think would be fair.
Yeah, no, it's totally fair. And I honestly feel like I feel like there is a potential to do more, but they have a really hard schedule, like you said, and I think that might be the biggest problem. But again, I don't worry about their offense. That is I feel like they can score against anybody, and I think because Big Ten defenses are so used to plotting offenses that are run orientated. I think this is going to be a real struggle for a lot of these Big Ten teams to be able to try to stop them from scoring. So if they're scoring 45 plus every game, there's no offense in the Big Ten scores on that on the regular besides of Ohio State. Like none of them can score that much. So it's like Michigan's not scoring that much. They didn't even score that much last year against the good teams they played. Penn State doesn't do that either. Wisconsin definitely doesn't do that. So I really think they have a shot here, especially because of what I feel about D'Anton Lynn. I didn't go too much into the breakdown of his scheme. I did a little bit with talking about UCLA, but you're gonna like his scheme. There is a better breakdown that I have that I'm gonna link to on my Twitter page or X page, so that people can see it. It was very informative. The guy did a really good job of showcasing each different look that he does with, disguising what linebackers are going and then which ones are going into coverage and which ones are going into blitzing the run and the quarterback. So, I feel like this team has the potential to do a lot of stuff. And considering that no one is talking about him, I haven't heard the usual teams right now. It's Georgia, Ohio State, Ole Miss, Missouri, Bama, Texas, and Penn State. Those are the teams right now, and no one is talking about USC. I don't hear anyone really even outside of Colin Cowherd. That's it. That's the only guy that's talking about USC at all, and he does because he lives in LA. I feel like it's a team, it's a diamond in the rough right now that could be a surprise playoff team and maybe more. We'll see. Okay, let's get into our favorites and our most I don't know how to describe it. Our most stress causing and most
guilty pleasure.
Yeah. The Florida Gators. Here we go.
Hey, thank God for college football 25.
Yeah. Have you been playing?
Oh, absolutely. Heck yeah. It's my second job now.
I forgot you got it. Yeah. I don't have a newer system. So I'm not going to do it. I don't know, dude. I just turned 40 2-3 weeks ago. I don't have the time. Plus I'm always writing screenplays and stuff. So I don't have time to play 3-4 hours of a game as well.
It is true. It is my second job now. So
yeah, exactly.
Every time I'm working at the Threshers, I'm like, dude, I got 5 stars to recruit right now. I don't got time for this.
Yeah, exactly. Okay. So let's get into this. I know we cover all 4 of these teams, but I think we have more of a focus on Florida. I think because of the fact of how much joy Florida has brought us over the years. That's why.
Far between.
Yeah, well, I mean, it was very joyous for 20 years. Now it's been kind of whatever. But I will say the reason that I am a college football fan as big as I am is because of Steve Spurrier and the Florida Gators of the 90s. So, I owe my whole why I do this stuff is because of them. And it has been frustrating. We have all watched this for, ever since the shoe throw, literally since the moment that shoe flew out of Marco Wilson's hand and landed on the ground, everything has gone downhill. I think they've won since that point, they've won 12, 17 games since that point, and lost 7.
They've had a losing. They've
had it's been 17 and 22 or something or 23.
Yeah.
since that game, and it's been frustrating because, you know, the team has talent in certain aspects, but there was a lot of deficiencies, and that's where, like, you know, like the discussion. It's always, it's been the last couple of days as well on X about Dan Mullen being at fault, and the recruiting was subpar. He left a lot of holes, you know, specifically with offensive line and, you know, defensively, and there was a lot of problems that couldn't just easily be fixed. That overnight it was just going to be like, oh yeah, we're back into it. And I will say there are other examples of coaches coming in and doing really good within the first year or two. You know, DeBoer at Washington or Fish at Arizona. So it can happen. It's just, I don't know. I think last year they felt that they were probably like an 8-9 win team, and they probably should have been, considering they should have beaten Missouri and they should have beaten Florida State and they
Arkansas
should have beaten Arkansas. So that's like 3 games that they should have won. That's, instead of 5-7 right there, they're 8-4 and into a bowl game, maybe 9-4. And if they're 9-4, people are like singing Billy's praises, and it can go conversely the other way as well. And I've talked to other guys on X about this, where it's like, you know, that South Carolina game was really close, and it's just, I don't know. It's things. This team is frustrating to watch. It's frustrating to watch them on defense. I think that's probably the biggest problem I have with anything. I'm not really mad with the offense. You know, it is not perfect, but it is definitely moving the ball and scoring points. When you're not able to stop anyone on third down, when you have a 4th and 17 and a team converts, when no one was guarding anybody and the guy's wide open for the conversion, like, it's just, something has to give. I know that they brought in Ron Roberts to help, what's his face, the young defensive coordinator,
Austin Armstrong.
Austin Armstrong. Yeah, so they brought in Ron Roberts to like basically be his like co-defensive coordinator, and I think that's the right move. I think they can work off each other. They can figure things out. They've already worked together before. Austin is a bright mind, but I think he just needs a little bit more help, which Ron is a very established coordinator and he knows what he's doing. I think Will Harris, the secondary coach, is tremendous. He's already bringing in a ton of talent. He helped bring in Asa Turner, who I think is going to be a solid defensive asset in the secondary. I think there's a lot of pieces there. Jordan Castell is back. I like Shamar James coming back as well. Miles Graham and Pup Howard and the Aaron Childs, those guys. I mean, I'm telling you, linebacking core, the team is way better than they were last year and 2 years ago. It's like night and day, the linebacking core. And I think there's depth along the defensive line. Offensively, I think they're still trying to figure stuff out. I think I saw reports of the other day that they're still struggling with the deep ball, and there was like quite a few turnovers in the second scrimmage on Saturday. And hopefully they can figure it out. Hopefully it's just working the kinks out. Trey Wilson is a stud coming back. Montrell had to have that surgery with the meniscus, so we'll see if he's ready to go game 1. I like a lot of their pieces. Jaden Baugh is a stud, number 13, running back. There's a ton of talent in the running room. Tight ends look great. Boardingham is looking like a stud. Badger, I don't think people realize how good Badger was on a very bad Arizona State team where he stood out. And they didn't even have a quarterback. They had Scadaboo throwing like halfback passes, and like he still put up like 700-800 yards, considering he didn't even have a quarterback. It was tremendous out of him. And DK, I think DK will be solid. Marcus Burke, I'm hearing good things. And there's Mizell, Andy Jean, the Hawkins. There's so many guys, younger guys that can come in, returning wise. Trey Smack as the kicker will be solid. Jeremy Crawshaw coming back as a punter. There is a lot to like. With Billy in general, it seems like he's doing the right things, getting the right pieces, getting the culture set, getting everything moving forward. And I know we have to talk about it, and I know we haven't talked about it yet, but the schedule is the worst schedule I've ever seen, but that's not a bad thing, because if they can go 9-3 or 8-4, they get in the playoff because of that schedule. And I know they're probably not going that, but if they can, if they win games against Florida State, if they win a game against LSU, or they win a game against Texas A&M, and they get like 7 or 8 wins, they have a shot to get into a 12-team playoff. And that's honestly more than they could ask for in the last several years, because they've been nowhere, and now they have at least a legitimate shot at getting into the playoff just because their schedule is that much more difficult. But Ian, I talk too much. I want to hear your thoughts.
God, I love your optimism. Yeah. Here's the thing. I was very critical last year, as you know, everybody knows. I've still not sold on the hire, and that isn't just on Billy Napier. That's the whole fiasco with Dan Mullen, because I said after Dan Mullen, I'm never going to think a hire is a guaranteed home run ever again until they prove me wrong. And I haven't been technically proven wrong yet. The one thing I said, and this is where I was like, I kind of jumping the shark here. The one thing about Billy Napier last season, it was, he had a good one against Tennessee, but then he gets blown out by Kentucky, gets a gutsy one against South Carolina, loses an embarrassing game to Arkansas in overtime, which they should have won, but they didn't know, couldn't call a timeout, or they got in the way. And then, Missouri was begging, to lose, let them win. Florida State was down to their second or third string everything, begging to get beat. They still lost. The team, somebody said it to me, it's like they find a way to make it close. They play just good enough to lose close. And It's infuriating, because a lot of, like you said, I agree with you. Those games, like Arkansas, they should have won. Missouri, they should have beaten. And Florida State, they should have beaten. There's your 3 wins. And if they showed up against Kentucky, who knows? I'm not saying they win, but it wouldn't have been I think they lost 33-14. Yeah. I don't think it would have been as bad. But this was the moment for me. The whole thing about Billy Napier, literally the reason they hired him was because Mullen could not recruit at an elite level. Napier had recruiting background, and the thought was he can come in, get this elite talent in, and go from there. That class in 3 weeks before signing day went from number 3 to number 16 in the nation. And yes, they got DJ Lagaway and McCray. That is good. But that cannot be putting a Band-Aid on the situation that literally third best recruiting class for the whole season, and in 3 weeks you lose it and go to 16. The only team they were better in the SEC in recruiting was Vanderbilt. That is unacceptable. And that's when I told my cousin George and my family, and probably a couple others, I think I'm done, because that was the one defense of Napier that people could tell me and I could believe in. That I was like, you know what? He might not know how to call plays. He might, find a way to lose, but he is getting talent. We're at number 3 in the nation with a really bad season. That's optimistic. And then it dropped to 16. And I'm like, I'm done. I'm just straight up done. And I cannot see with that schedule them winning that many games. Because I said that, and this is the other thing. The team is better. The roster is better. The transfers are huge. Yes, and everybody, you know, made it worse. ETN transferred. I think that's a blow, but get with the amount of transfers they got in, I think the roster is better.
Yeah.
I don't think the coaching is better though, because I just, again, going back to the first season, Napier, for Utah, he lost to Vandy. For, you know, something like, or against like LSU, just putting 49 on them. The offense has never been a problem. It's just like, again, it's frustrating watching them because you know this roster is good and they find ways to lose. And then you have potentially the toughest schedule I have ever seen.
Yeah.
There's no layup. There's one layup game, and that's Stanford, who we, you know, lest we forget, dropped 50 in the Swamp and Mullen Swan Song. They open against Miami in the Swamp. That's not easy because it's, you know, Miami got better and it's a rivalry game. You never know what happens. Stanford should be good, or should be, you know, the layup. Then you got to play A&M. That's not a guarantee. You got to go to play Mississippi State.
But A&M is a first-year head coach, so there might be some issues there. Mississippi State seems to be floundering, so they might be able to get that one. What is it? Kentucky next after that, or no, UCF, which is a rivalry game. I would say rivalry game. I know people were giving me crap about it, but I'm at this point. UCF is in the Big 12. They're a Power 4 team. This is a Florida team. They've played each other recently. There is enough, and then enough of these kids have played each other in high school that there is a rivalry there. As much as Florida doesn't want to admit it, there is a rivalry there. It just is natural. They're in the same state. They compete for the same players. Not a ton of the same players, but some. And, you know, it's just, there is a rivalry there, regardless if you want to admit it. I know it's like admitting that they're not a peasant anymore, but they're not. They're really not. I hate UCF fans, but I will admit that they're stepping up their level of play. Okay, so UCF, Tennessee game, probably a loss on the road, but they have a first-year starter in Nico, and there's no guarantee Nico is like a stud. You know, he played okay in the bowl game, but he only threw for like 150 yards. It was really their defense that stood out in that game. And Iowa was terrible on offense, so of course they're going to dominate their offense. So I don't know about that Tennessee game, but I think it's more likely a loss. Kentucky, homecoming at home. If I feel like if Billy does not beat Kentucky in his third year, that might be where they fire him. Like, you know, it would be like whatever the record is, and then they lose that game. That could be the death nail, because then it's Georgia, Texas, LSU, Mississippi, Florida State. So the last 5 games is a murderer's row, and it's going to be extremely difficult. But if they can go 1-4, 2-3 in that stretch, which, you know, LSU, Ole Miss, Florida State. LSU and Ole Miss are at home. Florida State is not as strong as they were last year. They're replacing a lot, and they have a transfer quarterback that, you know, DJU is, you know, we've talked about him for years. He seems to just not be that great of a quarterback. So I don't know. I'm looking at the schedule. People have broken it down the same way I have with describing it. I don't know, man. This is probably the most mysterious team that Florida has ever had as far as what their record could be. Their opponents are very difficult, but it also could be, if you look at it piecemeal, they don't look as daunting as they really are when you take a close look at every one of them. They could honestly be anywhere from like 9-3 to like 5-7. And it's a huge variation in between that too. I don't think they're going to win only 4 games. I don't think that's possible. I think they're better than that. So I'm thinking ceiling 9-3, floor 5-7. What do you got?
I'll just say this. I know I said it the first year of Napier, but I'll say it. I'll especially mean it here. If they can make a bowl game with this schedule, I will be doing my best to do backflips because that would be incredible. I'd say their ceiling 6 wins to me, and their floor is honestly like 2, 3. If those teams did get better and they can't get out of their own way, if they show the same mistakes they were doing last year against like Kentucky, Utah, Arkansas, those games, it's going to be a long one. It's going to be a really long season. I know I don't know if I told you this, but I know I told my cousin George, I said, this is the first time I've ever gone into this season. I'm always excited about every team, but this is the only time I've gone into it where I'm more optimistic and excited for USF than I am Florida. That is the first time in my life that has ever happened.
Well, there's a lot of optimism around USF right now, and it's just because there's a lot of pessimism around Florida, and all it really takes is just winning games. You know, if Billy wins 8-9 games this year, then the trajectory of the program is completely changed. They might win some of those recruiting battles. So where they're like recruiting very low right now, they end up winning a ton. So they end up, like top 15, top 10 recruiting class because they win all those games. And then it's also, I wanted to mention this when you were talking about when they went from 3rd to like 16th. You have to remember, though, they ended up getting some of those guys. They got Grimsley from Alabama that flipped, and they got, I think they got a Texas lineman as well. So, like, they got some of those players, and then also they got Pup Howard, who was supposed to come the year before. So some of those classes that are like, when they were finalized on those December days were this number and that rating, they've gotten some of those players that they originally were going after. And that is the beauty about the transfer portal now, is you may not get those guys the first time around, but because you have a relationship with them, there's a chance you have an opportunity to bring them into the fold if it doesn't work out for them at the school they're at. So, I think they did a tremendous job. We didn't even talk about Joey Slackman coming in on the defensive line as well. That kid looks like a stud, looks like a motor like no other, and he'll be a force on the D line. Justice Boone is back. I don't know. We gave our piece. Let's move on. Let's talk about speaking of Heisman, not Heisman, playoff teams. Who do you got playoff wise? Let me hear some of your. Give me like 2 solid, definitely going to make the playoff, and give me 2 sleepers.
I'm going to go. So for my 2 solids, I think Georgia, regardless of SEC championship or not, are in. Their schedule is a lot tougher, but I think they can, maybe with 1 loss, they'll get in. Or even with, like, if they lose 1 and then lose the SEC championship, they're still going to get in. They have the talent to show it. I think I'm going to put them as a lock, but they only based on their schedule. I think Ohio State. They have a very easy schedule. They do got to play at Eugene, Oregon, and then they got to find a way to beat Michigan. Yeah. But this is like, that was another thing I said. I was like, this is Ohio State's and Ryan Day's make or break year, because there's no excuses anymore. It's this year. And I said sleepers. I said USF. If they best case scenario, their only 2 losses are to Miami, and then they go undefeated in conference play, they're in. So there's one of them. And the other one, in terms of at least not as many people are talking about, I honestly think NC State can make a run for the ACC. At the very least, again, if they have a good enough record, they beat, those big teams, they can sneak in as like a 9-8 seed. I would say that would be, I wouldn't be surprised if they made it.
Yeah. And I agree with those. And I think like my 2 solids are probably, I'll say probably. It's tough. I feel like Texas, regardless of their record, will still get in the playoff. So I think they're solidly in. And then probably another one that would be solid is probably Penn State, because they don't have a tough schedule. So like there's a few games that even if they lose them or they go 1-1 or 1-2, they still have a really good chance of getting in. And then I'll say my sleepers, I'll say West Virginia. That's a team that I don't think a lot of people are talking a lot about. I think if they can win the Big 12, they'll get that spot. Even if they don't get, a playoff bye, they'll still might be able to get in. I think they're strong enough that a lot of people are not talking about them. And then another one is Nebraska. Nebraska has such an easy schedule at first that if they get rolling, if they can win 10 games, there's a chance that they could get in, and they don't have to play the Big Ten championship game to get in, and then they're in. So those are two teams that I like a lot that I think not a lot of people are talking about. Let's talk about Heisman. Give me a couple of your give me like one or two guys you feel strongly about, and then give me a sleeper, and then we'll I want to hear those from you.
So I would say for me, I think I don't would say sleeper because he's been up there, but I would say I think Cam Ward has the potential of having like a Michael Penix level season coming into Miami. He has all the talent in the world. I would say another favorite, Quinn Ewers. I think he's the best pocket passing quarterback in the league right now. And running backs, I'd say Ollie Gordon. And a sleeper, only for the fact I shouldn't even say sleeper because he is good. Just not a lot of people are talking about him. Is Quinshon Judkins of Ohio State?
Oh yeah,
fantastic running back, and even deadlier when they put him on screens or pass plays.
Yeah.
So if he's got all the potential to run away with it this year.
Oh, totally agree. Yeah, I love Quinn Ewers. I think because a lot of pub gets media attention gets put on Carson Beck, which rightfully so. He's on the best team and he is a solid quarterback. But I think Quinn Ewers is just a stud. And I think if I were an NFL team, I would want Quinn Ewers over Carson Beck in this draft coming up. So I'll say Quinn Ewers as well. Another one that I really like, I'm gonna have to say it, Byron Brown. I know it's a homer pick, but Byron put up the 8th best numbers out of any quarterback last year, and he's only going to be better. He has a lot of returning starters on offense coming back. You know, Coach Golish has him primed and ready to go. I can see him putting up 4,500, maybe 5,000 yards if everything goes all well, which I think it will. If they stay healthy and everything is fine, I think they should be able to put up huge numbers. And then another one, I'm trying to think. I guess Luther Burden at Missouri is a sneaky one because he could put up a ton of numbers, and they also use him in a lot of ways. So he could get like rushing touchdowns as well, and maybe like return yards and return touchdowns. Another one that I really like, I'm trying to think who else it might be, someone that is not really mentioned a lot of. I guess Byram's probably that guy. And I'll go with those two. And then we'll also see, because obviously Carson Beck is going to be up there. And then you'll have probably, I think Cam Ward could be up there depending on how well their season does, our season goes. And then I don't really like Ohio State's quarterback, Will Howard. I'm not like huge on. Oh, the one I knew I was going to remember this. Dylan Gabriel at Oregon. Oh my dude, I'm telling you, the kid. I was never a big fan of him at UCF. I was kind of like whatever. He seemed a little like a punk kid, but he did tremendous at Oklahoma, and I feel like he's going to do great at Oregon, where their style really suits his type of play. He could put up huge numbers, and Oregon is one of those teams. That's probably another team right there that should be a solid pick for the CFP. And so Dylan Gabriel is someone that's going to put up huge numbers. And then, you might look out for Miller Moss as well. Lincoln Riley has a track record of putting quarterbacks in the Heisman race. So we'll see. But that is the show, everybody. I am so glad to be back. I'm so glad that Ian's back here this is the 9th year of Hater Radio. I cannot believe I have been doing this for 9 years. This is ridiculous, but it's been a lot of fun. I love this game. I love the sport of college football. I hope that what we do here is apparent to all of you out there with our joy and love for this sport. I know we don't talk about all the details of everything, and we're not here in the off season, but we love the games. And so we love to talk about actual games of college football. I don't really care about the fluff. Recruiting obviously is a necessary evil, but we don't really focus on that. That's not what we're doing. What we do is we talk about the games, and I think we do a really good job of that. Ian, and I'm going to brag about him here. He's so knowledgeable of the Group of 5 teams. He knew about Coastal Carolina before anyone else. He knew about UTSA. Like he knows all these teams, and he knows all their players well before anyone else. And it is such a tremendous pleasure to be able to work with you, Ian. And
let's go Kennesaw State and Sam Houston. There
you go. I forgot to even bring it up. So there you go. So Kennesaw State and Sam Houston. So look out for those two this year. But this has been a tremendous honor to be able to do this show. And let me finalize the show by saying, look for us on haterradio.com for all of our articles. We'll have the UCLA preview this week, USF's preview, USC's preview, and Florida's preview. And I'll do something else as well as far as talking about the playoffs and Billy Napier's future and where the trajectory of the team for Florida is going. That's on haterradio.com. You can find us on X, formerly Twitter, hater_radio, also on Instagram and TikTok. And then for YouTube, it is at Hater Radio. For Facebook, I cannot remember what it is right now. I think it is Hater Radio CFB. But you can find us all on those. All of our shows will be on YouTube, so you can watch them there. Thank you for everything. It's going to be a great year. I look forward to it. Ian, thank you for everything you do. And have a good one, everybody.